Is your organization compliant? Does it report properly? Does it monitor data and privacy properly? This is what we're going to talk about. So compliance reporting involves documenting and communicating adherence to regulatory and organizational security standards. Do you follow them properly? If yes, how? First, you have internal reporting. This is regular audits and assessments. Regularly auditing and assessing your systems. Report your findings to senior management and document incidents and any compliance status. That's internally. External reporting, you want to submit reports to regulatory bodies involved, provide compliance documentations to your business partners, to your clients, and you share audit results with external stakeholders. If you don't do that, your customers lose your trust and you can be fined as well. So non-compliance, what could happen if you are not complying with security regulations and rules? First and foremost, financial penalties, fines imposed by regulatory bodies. If you fail to comply, it can either be percentage of your budget or a huge amount. So you want to comply with regulations. If you're storing patient data, you comply to the HIPAA rules. If you're storing credit card information, you comply to PCI DSS rules. If you're in the European Union, you comply to GDPR rules and more. Restrictions or prohibitions on certain business activities. So you can be sanctioned on certain part of your business if you don't comply with regulations. It can lead to reputational damage, loss of trust, and credibility with your customers if you don't comply with regulations. For example, in September 2017, Equifax announced that they suffered a data breach, and the incident affected more than 150 million Americans. That's like 45% of the US population, and 80% of those who had a credit report. It also affected the citizens of Britain and Canada. And most of those who were affected had their social security numbers, birth dates, and addresses compromised. Some unlucky people also had their driver's licenses and credit card numbers stolen. The settlement totaled more than $450 million. It affected individuals, and they're still like, even until January of 2024, they were still fighting in court over certain cases. So reputational damage, huge. Revocation of licenses. You can be forced to stop operating in your business, depending on what compliance you breached. Breaches of contract. So lawsuits, termination of agreements, breaches of contracts. These are some penalties to non-compliance. So how can you monitor compliance? How can you make sure you adhere to requirements? It's important to do your due diligence. That's research, preparing, all practical stuff done before implementing something. Implementing and maintaining appropriate security measures. So do your due diligence, do detect, make sure you have the right tools, make sure you have the money, make sure. It's important to do your due diligence before you carry out any kind of task. Attestation and acknowledgement. So formal statements by employees and third parties ensuring compliance. Regularly training your employees, performing awareness programs for your staff and your third-party vendors. Internal and external monitoring. You want to conduct internal audits and assessments, and also hire third parties to perform audits and assessments. Know that you did your part in ensuring that you were complying to regulations. And automation. So you can use automated tools to track compliance metrics. You use software, you use apps to ensure real-time monitoring and compliance. Popular software like Nessus, like Burp Suite have compliance tools to ensure that organizations are compliant. How can you ensure privacy? Adhering to laws and regulations that protect personal data. So what is the data subject? Data subject is the individual whose personal data is being collected and stored. So you are probably a data subject on another website, on another organization. Now you have a controller and processor, which we talked about in sections 5.1. Controller is the entity that determines the purpose and means of processing personal data. For example, an online retail company like Amazon, they decide what the customer data, like the names, address, payment information, to collect, for which purpose to collect the data, and how long to retain the data. The processor is the entity that processes the data on behalf of the controller. For example, a card payment processor like Stripe They handle the payment transactions on behalf of Amazon, for example. They process the payment information according to the instructions and requirements set by Amazon in that case, in the example. And what are some legal implications? It can be local, like adhering to state laws or regulational data, like the CCPA in California, the California Consumer Privacy Act. Can be national, compliance with national regulations like GDPR in the European Union, General Data Protection Regulation. And it can be global, like ensuring compliance with international protection standards like APEC, I think it's the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation countries. So who owns the data? When we talk about ownership, is who owns the data and the rights associated with the data, and who is accountable for the data. And when we talk about data inventory and retention, it's important to maintain an inventory of personal data. You don't just want data to be thrown out anywhere. You ensure data retention policies and you enforce them. You establish them and you enforce them. And the right to be forgotten, when you see the GDPR or other frameworks like that, right to be forgotten is allowing data subjects to request deletion of their personal data. This is very common in the European Union, but not very common in the United States.
All right, guys, that concludes our course for today. Let me know what you think. Hope you enjoyed it. And make sure to follow us on all our social media platforms, which includes YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Of course, do not forget to order our awesome Amazon flashcards that you can get for just $15, and they're awesome because they help you study.